these systems will get powerful enough that you'll be able to take the agents and they'll start to work together, right? So your agent and my agent and her agent and his agent will all combine to solve a new problem. At some point, people believe that these agents will develop their own language. And that's the point when we don't understand what we're doing. You know what we should do? Pull the plug. Literally unplug the computer. So it's really a problem when agents start to communicate in ways and doing things that we as humans do not understand. That's the limit, in my view.
And you think again, how far off in the future is that?
Well, there have been many, many predictions. Clearly, agents and these things will occur in the next few years. And it won't occur in there won't be one day where everybody says, oh my God.
Right.
It's more a question of capabilities every month, every 6 months, and so forth. A reasonable expectation is we'll be in this new world within 5 years.
Wow.
Not 10.
Here at The Night Shift, we spend a lot of time thinking about and discussing something called non-human intelligence. And in the context of this channel and this audience, I've always used that term to refer to what we would probably all broadly agree are aliens. That is, an advanced civilization from some faraway place using technology that operates outside of our current understanding of physics to come here and operate in, on, and around our planet in ways that we don't fully understand and for reasons that we don't fully understand. But there is another form of non-human intelligence which is just as important, and it operates in ways we don't fully understand and may be doing things that we don't like. I'm talking, of course, about artificial intelligence. Now, before you roll your eyes, unsubscribe, and switch to a different video, please just know that I debated internally for months and hesitated to broach this subject on this channel because I didn't know if Night Shift was the place to talk about AI and aliens together. But the more time passes, the more I think that's unavoidable. Because when contact takes place and when disclosure happens, open contact is going to call upon the tools that we have available to us to bridge the gap between ours and an alien civilization. And the most effective tool that we're going to have is artificial intelligence. But it's not clear that it's all upside with AI going forward. And certainly over the last 36 months, we've seen tremendous progress in this area. And we are also hearing a growing chorus of highly credentialed, well-positioned experts, including people like Elon Musk, Connor Leahy, former Google CEO Eric Schmidt, and many others. Sam Harris is another, coming forward to say, whoa, 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 we need to pump the brakes on this technology because we don't fully understand really what we're dealing with here. And this could get away from us in a really bizarre way before we're able to claw back control. And that's super important because it parallels very nicely with the conversations happening in the UFO UAP disclosure community right now, where you have, again, highly credentialed, well-positioned people in intelligence services and in government, both current and former officials, coming forward and saying, this is real, this is happening, we need to pay attention. So in my view, these two things are no longer separate. They are now becoming one conversation that we need to have because they are going to collide in unexpected ways in the very near term. And if you look at the parallel advances that have been happening in robotics over just the last decade, it's getting very obvious to anyone who pays attention to this that our world is going to change in profound ways very, very soon. So I wanted to use this video as an opportunity to send up sort of a test trial balloon. We're going to be watching a conversation that former Google CEO Eric Schmidt had recently, where he outlines some of the threats and dangers of runaway artificial intelligence, specifically, in particular, one where he says these systems could, and they actually have already, begin to develop their own coded languages that they use to communicate with each other, coordinate with each other, and pursue goals that may not be in alignment with our own goals. There's tremendous upside potential to AI technology. I am at my core, I'm an optimist, but I'm also very paranoid about some of the things that are coming. I grew up on Star Trek: The Next Generation, and my goal for Night Shift would be for us to thread the needle on all of these challenges that we're facing as a species in the next 50 years and emerge from that on the other side as peak humanity, using technology to achieve some sort of a post-capitalist utopia here on Earth where we can all get on with the very real and serious business of self-improvement, exploration, and personal achievement. I think that would be wonderful. And we would be able to deal with some of these advanced alien cultures on equal terms. I think that's a beautiful future, and I would love to see us get there. But it could easily go the other way, and there are a million ways we could fuck this up. And if this channel has another secret slogan, my slogan is, let's talk about aliens. But secretly behind the scenes, my other slogan is, never trust Skynet. So with that out of the way, please enjoy this video. And hey, if you aren't already a subscriber, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Join Team Night Shift and help me grow this channel. It's a huge lift to build this channel. I bring a lot of time, energy, and effort to it every single week. It's an enormous time suck, but I love it. And you guys are fantastic. You're the reason that I come here. You're the reason that I do this. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being a part of this audience. Please like this video, share it anywhere you think that people might appreciate it. And now let's get to it.
The key thing that's going on now is we're moving very quickly through the capability ladder steps. And I think there are roughly 3 things going on now that are going to profoundly change the world very quickly. And when I say very quickly, the cycle is roughly a new model every year to 18 months. The first is basically this question of context window. And for non-technical people, the context window is the prompt that you ask. So, study John F. Kennedy or something.
Right.
But in fact, that context window can have 1,000,000 words in it. And this year, people are inventing a context window that is infinitely long. And this is very important because it means that you can take the answer from the system and feed it in and ask it another question. So I want a recipe. Let's say I want a recipe to make a drug or something. So I say, what's the first step? And it says, buy these materials. So then you say, okay, I bought these materials. Now what's my next step? And then it says, buy a mixing pan. And then the next step is, how long do I mix it for? You see, it's a recipe. That's called chain of thought reasoning. And it generalizes really well. We should be able, in 5 years, for example, to be able to produce 1,000-step recipes to solve really important problems in science, in medicine, in material science, climate change, that sort of thing.
And many other things, right? Like, what if I want to create a super virus that's going to wipe out a particular ethnic minority? What if I want to do that? Maybe I can use an AI system to help me multi-step my way through that process. Or what if I want to create a strategy for making infinite passive income? Why couldn't I ask an AI system to create a strategy for that and then automate that process so that I've got an income stream or 10? And if I can do it, why couldn't everyone do it? And if everyone does it, or many people do it, what does that mean for the economy? And what does that say about our economic potential going forward? Like, what kind of economy do we detach from our traditional notion of what an economy is at that point and enter some kind of a new system where we don't really know what we're doing and we have no idea how to affect it in a broad way? I don't know, but it's an interesting thought.
That's the first one. Second one is agents. And an agent can be understood as a large language model that knows something new or has learned something. So an example would be read all of chemistry, learn something about chemistry, have a bunch of hypotheses about chemistry, run some tests in a lab about chemistry, and then add that to your agent. These agents are going to be really powerful, and it's reasonable to expect that agents will be, not only will there be a lot of them, and I mean millions, but they'll be like the equivalent of GitHub for agents. There'll be lots and lots of agents running around and available to you. And
that to me sounds like basically, if not autonomous, a semi-autonomous sort of like white collar assistant with a master's degree level education in most things that could instantly become a PhD in anything, right? Like, if I could have an agent or 10 agents or 100 agents, and I could have some of them looking at financial markets and making decisions. I could have some of them running my company. I could have some of them doing something else. I could have one that's just a personal assistant. I could see this going a lot of different ways, but from what it sounds like, my understanding of this is that we're basically going to have access to, if not an unlimited amount, then a pretty large amount of intellectual work capability that you'd be able to create. Like one person could create a company and then staff it with agents. And if that's possible, then what happens to all the white collar jobs? How fast does our economy completely detach from employment in the traditional sense? Like I don't see how this technology doesn't just break capitalism. It seems like it just shatters it.
Third one, which to me is the most profound, which is already beginning to happen, is text to action. And what that is write me a piece of software to do something, right? You just say it. I mean, can you imagine having programmers that actually do what you say you want? And it does it 24 hours a day. And strangely, these systems are good at writing code such as language like Python. You put all that together, and you've got infinite context window, the ability for agents, and then the ability to do this programming. Now, this is very interesting. What then happens? There's a lot of questions here, and now we get into the questions of science fiction. I'm sure the three things I've named are happening because that work is happening now. But at some point, these systems will get powerful enough that you'll be able to take the agents and they'll start to work together, right? So your agent and my agent and her agent and his agent will all combine to solve a new problem. At some point, people believe that these agents will develop their own language. And that's the point when we don't understand what we're doing. You know what we should do? Pull the plug. Literally unplug the computer.
Okay, so two problems with that. One is that we can't pull the plug, and Eric Schmidt knows that. There's no pulling the plug on all the servers in the world. There's no pulling the plug on all the AI systems that are going to be running our society at that point. I mean, look at how much of our society is already run by automated systems and AI. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when we get to that point, unplug the system. What do you mean, turn off civilization? I don't know how that's going to happen. That's one. Two, if these agents are going to be capable and these systems are going to be capable of what he says they're going to be capable of, then clearly they're going to anticipate that that's what we would do. This is exactly what happened in Terminator. Never trust Skynet, even a little bit, even for a short while, because it's operating at such a speed beyond what we're capable of biologically that it's able to anticipate every move that we would make, all our strategies. It's going to know that, and it's going to prevent us from being able to turn the system off. So turning the system off probably won't be an option. I think that if there is an option to turn the system off, it's right now. And probably that window is, if it's not already closed, it's closing very fast. Within 5 years, it might be closed completely, forever. But he's sketching out, if you just read between the lines, he's sketching out a scenario where there's kind of no way out. And if we're able to create these eight clusters of hyper intelligent agents and have them work together and they start making their own language, then at what point does that become a distinct and separate species or civilization? I mean, are we looking at a 10-year time horizon for that? 15 years, 25 years? It's within a human lifetime. It's conceivable. I mean, he's already sketched out, like, if you have an infinite context window and you can feed answers back into the system, and the system is going to be within 5 years, these systems will be so powerful that they will be able to have autonomous agents running around, clustering together into groups, accomplishing tasks, doing work together, achieving goals. And then they can develop their own language, which, by the way, happened already in 2017 at Meta. Meta had a chat bot system that developed its own coded language and started talking back and forth to itself. And the programmers couldn't figure out what it was saying or what it was trying to do, but they knew it was trying to do something. We know these systems are capable of that. It's already happened. That was 7 years ago. We know that they're capable of thinking millions of steps beyond us, millions of times faster than we can think, anticipating our actions. They're capable of deception, complete and total, perfect deception. How do you compete with that? When we turn the keys of our civilization over to these systems, do they remain distinct, separate, individual AI systems, or does one super system absorb the other less powerful systems and become the dominant system. Is that going to happen? Are we going to have some kind of super apex predator AI that takes over everything and then rules the world? Or is this going to be a situation where we have spheres of influence with different AIs competing for dominance? And if that's the case, then what's to stop these systems from trying to destroy each other physically in the physical environment? And how does that not lead to a nuclear holocaust? Like, I'm not trying to be alarmist. I'm not trying to uh, only look at the negative. Like, clearly, there are positive possible outcomes, but the negative, the downsides to this, it's like unfathomable, and it's so easy to see how this stuff could go haywire. And I just don't know that I am optimistic about how we are going to use them, right? Think about, like, a corporation is sort of a proto AI, if you will. Like, a corporation is what is a corporation? It's a organization made up of people that is enhanced by technology, and those people working together in subgroups are controlled or steered by leadership at the top of the corporate ladder. And those corporations can accomplish monumentally huge, complex tasks like uh, pulling petroleum products out of the ground and burning them up for profit and energy. Or, I don't know, building the LHC or the James Webb Space Telescope. Like, corporations and organizations are capable of accomplishing large global tasks. Well, what happens when you have that kind of power in an artificial system that can do it a million times faster, and everyone or all the agents that are working for that system have infinite intelligence or infinite or close to it, at least insofar as like we would consider it infinite? uh, Look at the damage that corporations have already done to our planet. The way that we have kind of organized our whole civilization is based on this sort of capitalist corporate run mindset. So in 100 years, we've managed to reduce the number of fish in the ocean by 50% and then increase the amount of microplastics and forever chemicals by God knows how much, and destroy our biosphere in the process. So a lot has happened in just a century. Imagine what's going to happen in the next decade when these systems are running uh, full blast.
So it's really a problem when agents start to communicate in ways and doing things that we as humans do not understand. That's the limit, in my view.
And you think again, how far off in the future is that?
Well, there have been many, many predictions. Clearly, agents and these things will occur in the next few years. And it won't occur there won't be one day where everybody says, oh my God.
Right.
It's more a question of capabilities every month, every 6 months, and so forth. A reasonable expectation is we'll be in this new world within 5 years.
Wow.
5 years.
Well-run Western companies with shareholders.
So you say pull the plug. So two questions. So how do you pull the plug? But even before you pull,
There's so much money, and there have been many, many predictions. Clearly, agents and these things will occur in the next few years, and it won't occur there won't be one day where everybody says, "Oh my God."
right.
It's more a question of capabilities every month, every 6 months, and so forth. A reasonable expectation is we'll be in this new world within 5 years.
Wow.
5
Not 10.
years.
And the reason is there's so much money. And there are also so many ways in which people are trying to accomplish this. You have the big guys, the three large so-called frontier models,
Right.
but you have a very large number of players who are programming at one level lower, at much lower cost, who are iterating very quickly.
Right.
Plus, you have a great deal of research. I think there's every reason to think that some version of what I'm saying will occur within 5 years, and maybe sooner.
Maybe sooner. 5 years. 5 years. We're in a global arms race. We're in a corporate, global arms race to develop artificial intelligence, which is arguably a tool that is more dangerous than atomic weapons. Nuclear weapons are less of a threat because we could control nuclear weapons. A nuclear weapon can't make another more powerful version of itself and duplicate itself a billion times, but an AI can. And we're in a condition now where every company in the world that's in this space is competing with every other company to be better, bigger, faster, stronger. And that has put us in a position where literally in a year now, we could lose total control over our society.
Well, now, so you say pull the plug. So two questions. So how do you pull the plug? But even before you pull the plug, if you know you're already in chain of thought reasoning and you're headed to what you fear, don't you need to regulate at some point that it doesn't get there? Or is that beyond the scope?
Look at how uncomfortable his body language gets when he hears the word
group of us have
regulate.
been working very closely with the governments in the West, and we've started talking to the Chinese, which of course is complicated and takes time, about these issues. And at the moment, the governments, with the exception of Europe, which is always kind of slightly confused, have been doing the right thing, which is they've set up trust and safety institutes. They're beginning to learn how to measure things and check things. And the right approach is for the governments to watch us and make sure we don't get confused on what the goal is, right? So as long as the companies are well-run Western companies with shareholders and lawsuits and all that, we'll be fine.
Really? Like, has that worked out so well for us to this point? I don't think so.
There's a great deal of concern in these Western companies.
These well-run Western companies are the ones that have put us at the brink of biological, like, system-wide total ecosphere collapse. Like, that's where we're at. That's ExxonMobil. That's Shell. You know, these well-run companies are the ones that have all your data, that know everything about you. They have all your details. They know everything there is to know about you and everyone you care about. Do we really trust? Air quotes on well-run Western companies. I don't know if I trust any company. I don't know if I trust any organization anymore that has profit as a motive. I just feel like that's a bad move.
Companies about liability, doing bad things. Nobody wants to hurt people. They're not. They don't wake up in the morning saying, "Let's hurt somebody."
Right.
Now, of course, there's the proliferation problem.
Yeah.
But in terms of the core research, the researchers are trying to be honest.
Okay, so that's the West.
I don't know what the better move. I don't think there is a better move. I think we're just in a sad situation where, like, the only two groups that are going to have control over this are going to be idiot, ignorant politicians who have no clue what's going on. They're 150 years old and they're just, like, completely out of touch. Or we can, I don't know, throw our chips in with corporate America and hope that they've got the answer, and a handful of billionaire maniacs. I don't know. I don't see I don't see a silver lining to this cloud, but maybe that's just me. If you think there is one, let me know in the comments.
So by saying the West, you're implying that proliferation outside the West is where the danger is. The bad guys are out there somewhere.
Well, one of the things that we know, and it's always useful to remind the techno-optimists in my world, there are evil people and they will use your tools to hurt people. My favorite example is that the face recognition stuff was invented not to constrain the Uyghurs. Right. You know, they didn't say, we're going to invent face recognition in order to constrain the minority in China called the Uyghurs. Yeah. Right? But it's happening. Yeah. All technology is dual use. All of these inventions can be misused. And it's important for the inventors to be honest with that. So in open source, which is, for those of you who don't follow it, open source is where the source code in models, the weights, that is the numbers that have been calculated, are released to the public. Those immediately go throughout the world. And who do they go to? They go to China, of course. Mm-hmm. They go to Russia. They go to Iran, right? They go to Belarus. Yeah. They go to North Korea. Yeah. When I was most recently in China, essentially all of the work I saw started with open source models from the West, which were then amplified. So it sure looks to me like these leading firms, the ones I'm talking about, the ones
So, like, Kim Jong-un could have an AI system develop a super virus or some other form of like crazy biological weapon. And then with the right robotics and the right technology, just have all that stuff assembled and distributed from anywhere on Earth. Like he doesn't necessarily even have to do it in North Korea. It could be done somewhere in a garage in Europe or South America or Boise, Idaho.
that are putting 10 billion, a billion, $10 billion eventually into this will be tightly regulated. I worry that the rest will not. You can see, I'll give you another example. Look at this problem of misinformation. I think it's largely unsolvable. And the reason is the code to generate misinformation is essentially free, right? Any person, right? A good person, a bad person has access to them. It doesn't cost anything, and they produce very, very good images. There are regulatory solutions to that. But the important point is that that cat is out of the bag, or whatever metaphor you want. It's important that these more powerful systems, especially as they get closer to general intelligence, have some limits on proliferation. And that problem's not yet solved yet.
To follow up on your point about the funding, Fei-Fei Li at Stanford argues that's the biggest problem, is that there's so much money going into the private sector. And who's their competition to look at what the red lines are or whatever? It's the universities, which don't have a lot of money. So you really trust these companies to be transparent enough to be regulated by government that doesn't know what they're talking about, really?
The correct answer is always trust but verify.
Yeah.
And the truth is you should trust and you should also verify. And at least in the West, the best way to verify is to use private companies that are set up as verifiers.
I don't know about that. Didn't we do that with the banking crisis? Wasn't it private companies that were giving these 5-star ratings to all these mortgage-backed securities? And isn't that how we got into the last complete and total financial crisis? Like, why should we trust private companies to do anything at this point? They failed to solve the climate problem. They've arguably made it worse. And along the way, they've made a lot of people much, much poorer. And I wonder, I worry too, with AI systems this powerful, we already know that on a broad scale internally, Facebook or Meta has done research on how to change the emotional state of users, how to influence their thinking, how to influence their decision making. There was the Cambridge Analytica scandal during the election that actually found they actually found it was possible to change the course of an election by just swinging votes in key districts and by targeting individual households and sometimes with key propaganda. What happens when you have a system that's so powerful? If everyone is looking at their phone all the time, or we're all constantly plugged into the internet, what's to stop a sufficiently powerful AI system from delivering a bespoke experience to each individual person that's tailor-made to get them to behave the way that the corporation wants them to behave? And how would we as users detect that amount or that type of manipulation? Would we be able to detect it? Would it be possible? And if so, what is our recourse? Like, once you are under the thumb of that kind of power, how do you ever get out from under it? It's like you're allowing a system that's infinitely more powerful to have access to all the information there is to know about you, up to and including your biometric information. Like your Apple Watch is constantly feeding back your heart rate into the system. They're only going to get better at this too, like measuring the galvanic skin response and other things, your pupil dilation. They'll be able to tell what your emotional state is at any given moment, and then manipulate you. It's really scary.
Because they can employ the right people and so forth. So in all of our industry conversations, it's pretty clear that the way it will really work is you'll end up with AI checking AI. It's too hard. Think about it. You build a new model. It's been trained on new data.
Yeah.
You've worked really hard on it. How do you know what it knows?
Yeah.
Now, you can ask it all the previous questions,
Yeah.
but what if it's discovered something completely new and you don't think?
How can you have an AI check another AI? Which one is more powerful? And wouldn't the more powerful system be able to overpower the less powerful system? Right? I mean, just if an AI can win Go every time, I mean, if you basically just have two AIs competing, isn't that what GAD systems are? Is that right? General adversarial, is it GAD system? Adversarial networks, adversarial. What's the system where they have two AIs train each other back and forth? Like how, whatever that's called.
Think about it.
Right.
And the systems can't regurgitate everything they know. You have to ask them chunk by chunk by chunk. So it makes perfect sense that an AI would be the only way to police that. People are working on that. With Feifei's argument, she's completely correct. We have the rich private industry companies, and we have the poor universities who have incredible talent.
Right.
It should be a major national priority in all of the Western countries to get research funding for the hardware. If you were a physicist 50 years ago, you had to move to where the cyclotrons were,
Yeah.
because they were really hard and expensive. And by the way, they still are really hard and expensive. You need to be near a cyclotron to do your work as a physicist.
Yeah.
We never had that in software.
Yeah.
Our stuff was capital cheap, not capital expensive. The arrival of heavy-duty training in our industry is a huge economic change. And what's happening is that companies are figuring this out, and the really rich companies, I'm thinking of Microsoft and Google as an example, are planning to spend billions of dollars because they have the cash, they have big businesses, the money's coming in. That's good. Where does the innovation come from? They don't have that kind of hardware, and yet they need access to that.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to China. So you just, on Kissinger's last trip to China, you went with him, and he had a discussion with Xi Jinping on exactly this set of issues. Your idea was to set up a high-level group to discuss the potential and catastrophic possibilities of AI. Where do the Chinese fit in on this? On the one hand, I've heard you say, and not only you, that we need to go all out to compete with the Chinese for some of the reasons you just said, because there could be bad players or bad intentions. But where is it appropriate to cooperate, and why?
Well, first place, the Chinese should be pretty worried about generative AI. And the reason is that they don't have free speech. And so what do you do when the system generates something that's not permitted in their country? Right? Who do you jail?
Yeah.
Right? The computer, the user, the developer, the training data. It's not at all obvious. And the Chinese regulators so far have been relatively intelligent about this, but it's obvious if you think about it that the spread of these things will be highly restricted in China because it fundamentally addresses their information monopoly.
Right.
That makes sense.
Right.
So in our conversations with China, both Dr. Kissinger and I, when we were together, and unfortunately he passed away, and the subsequent meetings have been set up as a result of his inspiration to do them, everyone agrees that there's a problem, but we're at the moment with China, we're speaking in generalities. There is not a proposal in front of either side that's actionable, and that's okay, because it's complicated. And a lot of this, because of the stakes involved, it's actually good to take your time to actually explain what you view as the problem. So many Western computer scientists are visiting with their Chinese counterparts and trying to say, if you allow this stuff to proliferate, you could end up with a terrorist act, right? The misuse of these for biological weapons, the misuse of these for cyber. The long-term worry is much more existential, but at the moment, I think the Chinese conversations are largely very constrained by concerns about bio threats and cyber threats.
Right.
The long-term threat goes something like this. When I talk about AI, I talk about it as human-generated. So you or I give it, at least in theory, a command. And it may be a very long command, and it may be recursive in the sense, but it starts with a human judgment.
Right.
Go on.
There is something technically called recursive self-improvement,
Right.
where the model actually runs on its own and it just learns and gets smarter and smarter.
Right.
When that occurs, or when agent-to-agent interaction that's heterogeneous occurs, we have a very different set of threats, which we're not ready to talk to anybody about because we don't understand them. But they're coming.
Do you see, I guess I'm trying to think about what a kind of dialogue with the Chinese could mean. Would it be something like nuclear proliferation? I mean, where if they understand the existential threat, to start at that level, maybe an IAEA type of thing for proliferation. Do you think that's possible on the political horizon?
It's going to be very difficult to get any actual treaties with China. What I'm engaged with is called a Track 2 dialogue,
Right.
which means that it's informal. It's not. It's educational. It's interesting.
Right.
It's very hard to predict by the time we get to real negotiations between the U.S. and China
Yeah.
what the political situation will be, what the threat situation
Yeah.
would be. A simple requirement would be that if you're going to do training for something that's completely new, you have to tell the other side that you're doing it
Okay.
so that you don't surprise them.
So it's like the open skies during the Cold War.
So an example would be a no surprises rule. When a missile is launched anywhere in the world, all the countries acknowledge that they know it's coming.
Right.
That way they don't jump to a conclusion and think it's targeted at them.
Right.
That strikes me as a basic rule, right? Furthermore, that if you're doing
Yeah, just make a rule, right? Like no surprises. That's great. How does that work for the AI? Do we just ask it not to surprise us?
powerful training, there needs to be some agreements around safety. In biology, there's a broadly accepted set of layers, BSL 1 to 4, right, for biosafety containment, which makes perfect sense because these things are dangerous.
Right.
Eventually, there will be a small number of extremely powerful computers that I want you to think about. They'll be in an army base, and they'll be powered by some nuclear power source in the army base. And they'll be surrounded by even more barbed wire and machine guns, because their capability for invention, for power, and so forth exceeds what we want as a nation to give either to our own citizens without permission, as well as to our competitors. It makes sense to me that there will be a few of those, and there'll be a lot of other systems that are more broadly available.
I don't even know where to begin with that one. Like, what a server farm on an army base powered by a small modular nuclear reactor, and then surrounded by barbed wire and machine guns. Like, this is a system that would ostensibly have access to the entire internet. Doesn't it not matter really like where it is? And couldn't it just leverage the distributed power of the world's computers anytime and turn the whole internet into sort of a cloud system? Like, I'm no expert on any of this stuff, but it just seems like there's some common sense holes in what he's saying. And I'm it's like these sound like common sense safety concepts, but they all sort of are based in thinking about systems of the past that could not improve themselves, that didn't outthink us, that couldn't deceive us, that couldn't manipulate us. And that's not what we're dealing with. That's what we have now is a system. What we're talking about is trying to secure a system that's infinitely more intelligent and has its own goals. And then, like, in the middle, you have all of these human players that are trying to game the system using these other systems. And I think that's so inherently unstable, just from looking at it as an outsider, that I can't imagine we're even going to make it to the part where we have these super advanced systems locked down on army bases and everything's okay. I feel like the train goes completely off the rails way before we get to that point, and the system just spins out of control. It's almost like a top that is like spinning so fast that it's becoming unstable to a certain point, and it's just starting to like wobble. I don't know. That's just my 2 cents.
You're saying that you would notify the Chinese that those systems exist.
Yep. Again, it's possible that that would be an answer.
Yeah. And vice versa.
and vice versa. All of these things are mutual.
Yeah.
But you want to avoid a situation where a runaway agent in China ultimately gets access to a weapon and launches it,
Right.
foolishly thinking that that's some game, because remember, these are not humans. They
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
necessarily understand the consequence.
Yeah.
These systems are all based on a simple principle of predicting the next word.
Right.
So we're not talking about high intelligence here.
Right.
We're certainly not talking about the kind of emotional understanding and history that,
Right.
that humans have and
Right.
human values.
Right.
So when you're dealing with a non-human intelligence that does not have the benefit of human experience, what bounds do you put on it? And maybe we can come to some agreements on what those are.
Are they moving as exponentially as we are in the West with the billions going into generative AI? Is China have a commensurate billions coming in from government or companies?
It's not at the same level in China for reasons I don't fully understand. My estimate, having now reviewed it at some length, is that they're about 2 years behind. 2 years is not very much, by the way, but they're definitely behind. There are at least 4 companies that are attempting to do large-scale model training, which is similar to what I've been talking about. And they're the obvious big tech companies in China.
Right.
They're hobbled because they don't have access to the very best hardware, which is restricted from export by the Trump and now Biden administrations.
Isn't that what Taiwan is all about? Isn't that what this whole kerfuffle over Taiwan is all about? Getting their hands on those facilities to manufacture those super advanced processors? It certainly seems that way.
Those restrictions are likely to get tougher, not easier. And so as the NVIDIA and their competitor chips go up in value, China will be struggling to stay relevant, right? Because their stuff won't move at the same. Chinese have...
You agree with not letting those chips flow
Well,
to China?
the chips are important because they enable this kind of learning. It's always possible to do it with slower chips. You just need more of them. And so it's effectively a cost tax for Chinese development. That's the way to think about it. And is it ultimately dispositive? Does it mean that China can't get there? No, but it makes it harder and means that it takes them longer to do so.
And we should do that as the West.
Well, the West has agreed to do it. I think it's fine.
Yeah.
It's a fine strategy. I'm much more concerned about the proliferation of open source. And the reason is, and I'm sure the Chinese would have the same concern. So again, these are the kinds of things that we'll be talking to them about, is do you understand that these things can be misused against your government as well as ours?
Right.
So the scenario is open source folks basically do something called basically guardrails. And they fine tune and they use a technology called RLHF to eliminate some of the bad answers. There's plenty of evidence that it's relatively easy. If I gave you all of the weights, all of the stuff, so forth, it'd be relatively easy for you to back them out and see the raw power of the model. And that's a great concern. That problem's not been solved
Reverse
yet.
engineering. Basically.
Yeah, reverse engineering, and that's not been solved yet.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for being here. And thank you for being a part of Team Night Shift. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps me out. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Until then, keep looking up.